I probably wouldn't have driven my elbow into his solar plexus with the force of a battering ram. But when you're the lead coordinator for the biggest werewolf summit of the century, your heels are blistering, and you're running on 3 hours of sleep and pure caffeine, you don't have time for creeping waiters sneaking up on you in dark corridors. I expected him to growl. I expected him to have me arrested for treason. I certainly didn't expect him to corner me against a stack of folding chairs, looming over me like a dark, expensive storm cloud. Instead of ordering my execution, the most powerful man on the continent looked down at me with hungry, golden eyes, rubbed his bruised abs, and whispered the 3 words that sealed my fate: do it again. Welcome back to the pack and to Raven's Romance Library. I am so ready to dive into today's story with you. But first, I want to know, where in the world are you listening from right now, and do you have a furry reading buddy keeping you company? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to support the channel and unlock exclusive badges and early access to stories, make sure to check out our membership options below. Now get comfortable. It's time to find out what happens when you accidentally elbow an alpha king. Chapter 1. My elbow connected with the man's stomach with a sound like a wet thud against solid granite. It wasn't a polite nudge. It was a tactical strike. I had spun around with the full rotational force of a stressed-out event planner, running on an empty stomach and sheer rage, expecting to hit soft tissue. I didn't. I hit a wall of muscle that felt like it had been carved out of marble and wrapped in a tuxedo that cost more than my entire college tuition. "Don't sneak up on me," I shouted, the words leaving my mouth before I could even assess the damage. The man didn't stumble. He didn't wheeze. He didn't even drop the glass of scotch he was holding in his right hand. He just exhaled a sharp, winded breath, a sound that was less like pain and more like surprise. He stood there, unmoving, occupying 90% of the narrow supply corridor, blocking the only exit back to the ballroom. I clutched my clipboard to my chest like a shield, my heart hammering against my ribs. I mean it. You can't just loom behind people in staff hallways. We have liability waivers for a reason, and accidental organ rupture isn't covered under the catering insurance policy. The man looked down at me, and he was looking down. I was wearing 4-inch stilettos, and I still had to crane my neck to see his face. He had a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, eyes the color of molten gold, and a mouth that was currently set in a straight, unreadable line. He took a slow step forward. The air in the hallway suddenly felt very thin and very hot. He didn't look angry. He looked fascinated. "You have excellent form," he said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and went straight to my toes. Most people hesitate. I don't hesitate, I snapped, checking my watch. I had 4 minutes to get the keynote speaker on stage, and I was currently trapped in a closet with a giant. I coordinate. And right now, you are uncoordinated. Who are you? Security? You're too well dressed for catering, but you're too broad for a waiter. Did the agency send a bouncer? He tilted his head, a lock of dark hair falling over his forehead. He took another step, invading my personal space with terrifying confidence. "A bouncer," he repeated, tasting the word like it was an exotic spice. "I suppose I have been known to remove unwanted guests." "Great. Well, remove yourself," I said, trying to sidestep him. He mirrored my movement, blocking me. My eyes narrowed. "Look, big guy, I don't know what game you're playing, but I have a pack summit to run. There are 300 alphas in the next room who all think they're God's gift to the food chain, and if the microphone gives feedback during the opening speech, they're going to eat me. Literally." He didn't move. He looked at my elbow, then back up to my eyes. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold. He leaned down, placing a large, warm hand on the wall beside my head, trapping me. The scent of him, rainfall, ozone, and expensive whiskey, flooded my senses. "Hit me again," he murmured. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Do it again," he said, his voice dropping an octave, turning rougher, darker. "I want to see if it was a fluke." "I am not going to assault you for your entertainment," I huffed, though my face felt dangerously warm. "I charge extra for private combat lessons." The corner of his mouth ticked up. A smirk, a predatory, dangerous smirk. "I can afford it." "I bet you can," I muttered. I reached into the oversized pocket of my blazer and pulled out a half-used roll of silver duct tape. I slammed it against his massive chest. Reflexively, he caught it. "If you're going to stand here and block traffic, be useful," I ordered, using his momentary confusion to duck under his arm. "There's a loose patch of carpet near the VIP entrance. Tape it down before one of the dignitaries trips and sues me, and fix your tie, it's crooked." I didn't wait for a response. I shoulder-checked him, which was like shoulder-checking a redwood tree, and squeezed past him toward the door. "And stop lurking!" I threw over my shoulder as I shoved the heavy fire door open. "It's creepy." I stormed out into the chaotic backstage area, clicking my headset back on. "Sarah? Status report. Is the keynote speaker ready? I got held up by some massive, lazy security guard in the East Corridor." I didn't hear the man's response. I didn't see him staring at the roll of duct tape in his hand like it was a crown jewel. And I certainly didn't hear the low, dark chuckle that followed me down the hall. "Copy that, Sophie," Sarah's voice crackled in my ear, frantic. "The speaker is walking up to the podium now. You're missing the intro." I'm coming," I hissed, smoothing my skirt and sprinting toward the side stage curtains. "Who is the speaker anyway? The program just said, 'The Big Boss.'" "Sophie," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "It's the king. It's Hollis Lyle." I froze. My hand hovered over the curtain. The blood drained from my face faster than cheap champagne. Through the gap in the velvet curtains, I saw the podium. I saw the crowd of powerful alphas bowing their heads in reverence. And then, I saw him walking out onto the stage. The man from the hallway. He was still holding the duct tape, and he was looking right at me. Chapter 2. The silver roll of duct tape sat on the mahogany podium like a bizarre industrial paperweight. It was the only unpolished thing in a room filled with crystal chandeliers, Italian silk suits, and 300 of the most terrifying apex predators on the planet. And Hollis Lyle, the Alpha King, the supreme ruler of the Continental Alliance, was tapping his finger against it. Tap, tap, tap. I stood in the wings of the stage, paralyzed. My headset had slipped sideways, dangling by my ear, buzzing with Sarah's frantic whispers of, "Sophie? Why is he holding maintenance supplies? Is this a prop? Is this symbolic?" It wasn't symbolic. It was evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hollis began. His voice didn't need the microphone. It projected with a natural, resonant command that silenced the room instantly. "Thank you for gathering here tonight." He looked out over the sea of bowed heads. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his head toward the side curtain. Toward me. He didn't smile. He didn't point. He just locked those golden eyes onto mine and held them there. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My heart was doing gymnastics in my throat. He's going to execute me, I thought wildly. He's going to call me out right now. He's going to tell the world I assaulted the crown and then asked him to fix the carpet. Hollis broke eye contact, looking back at the confused audience. He picked up the roll of tape. "I was reminded backstage," he said, tossing the roll casually in his hand, "that leadership is not just about grand gestures. Sometimes it is about maintenance. It is about fixing the small, broken things before they cause a stumble." A ripple of polite, confused applause went through the room. They had no idea what he was talking about. They just clapped because he was the king. "I met a very efficient manager back there," Hollis continued, his voice dropping to a purr that made the hair on my arms stand up. "She informed me that my tuxedo was too tight in the shoulders. She also suggested I make myself useful." The crowd gasped. A low murmur of shock rippled through the front row. Insulting the king's appearance was grounds for social exile, or worse. I squeezed my eyes shut. I'm dead. I'm so dead. I'm going to be turned into a rug. "She was right," Hollis said. My eyes snapped open. He unbuttoned his suit jacket with one hand, shrugging his massive shoulders as if testing the fabric. "It is a bit restricting. Perhaps I have become too comfortable in stiffness. Perhaps I need a new tailor." He placed the tape back on the podium with a decisive thud. "Enjoy the summit." He walked off the stage, not toward the VIP stairs, not toward his security detail. He walked straight toward the side curtain where I was hiding. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I did the only rational thing an event planner in my position could do. I turned around, grabbed a tray of champagne flutes from a passing waiter, and tried to blend into the catering staff. "Keep walking, Kevin," I whispered to the waiter, ducking my head. "If anyone asks, I'm inspecting the bubbles." "Sophie," Sarah hissed in my ear. "The king is coming backstage. The schedule says he goes to the green room. Why is he coming to the loading dock?" "Because he's lost," I lied, walking faster. "I'm going to intercept him. Go check the sound system." I ditched the champagne tray on a stack of crates and made a break for the service exit. If I could just get to the parking lot, I could change my name, move to Alaska, and live as a hermit. I reached for the heavy metal handle of the exit door. My fingers brushed the cold steel. Freedom was inches away. Then a hand, large, warm, and terrifyingly familiar, slammed flat against the door, holding it shut. I froze. "Leaving so soon?" Hollis's voice rumbled right beside my ear. "You didn't even collect your payment for the lesson." I turned slowly. He was looming again. Up close, the tight shoulders I had critiqued were even more obvious. The man was a wall of muscle in bespoke wool, and he wasn't looking at me like a king looks at a subject. He was looking at me like a wolf looks at a particularly interesting rabbit that had just tried to bite him. "Your Highness," I squeaked. Then I cleared my throat and tried to summon my professional persona. "Mr. Lyle, I was just checking the perimeter. Security protocols." He stepped closer, forcing me back against the metal door. "The perimeter is secure, Sophie. I checked it myself." He knew my name. "I see you fixed your tie," I said, my voice sounding breathy and traitorous. "I did," he murmured, bracing his hands on the door on either side of my head, caging me in. "Now, about that carpet you wanted me to tape." Chapter 3. "The carpet is fine," I said quickly, pressing my spine flat against the cold metal of the exit door. Being caged by Hollis Lyle was an experience that defied the laws of physics. He wasn't touching me, yet I felt surrounded, enveloped by his heat and that maddening scent of rain and authority. "Is it?" Hollis tilted his head, his golden eyes scanning my face with an intensity that felt like a physical caress. "Because you seemed very concerned about liability waivers 5 minutes ago. You were quite bossy." "I was doing my job," I deflected, clutching my clipboard like a weapon. "And technically, you were loitering, in a fire lane. So, really, I should be writing you up for a safety violation." His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "Write me up then." "I don't have a pen," I lied. I had 3 pens in my hair and 1 behind my ear. "A shame," he drawled. He leaned in closer, until his face was inches from mine. I could see the flecks of amber in his irises. "I enjoyed your management style. It's rare that anyone tells me to make myself useful. Usually, people just tremble and offer me things I don't want." "Like what?" I whispered, unable to look away. "Power, subservience, excuses." His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back up to my eyes. "You offered me duct tape." "Ideally, it fixes everything," I managed to say, my heart rate spiking so high I was surprised the fire alarm didn't go off. "Sophie!" Sarah's voice screamed in my headset, shattering the moment. "Where are you? The West Coast Alpha is demanding vegan options immediately, and the kitchen is saying they only have venison." I flinched, the reality of my job crashing back in. I wasn't the heroine in a romance novel. I was the coordinator of a disaster waiting to happen. "I have to go," I said, trying to duck under his arm. "Vegan crisis, big drama. You know how it is." Hollis didn't budge. He just lowered his arm, effectively blocking my path. "The vegan crisis can wait. My security team is waiting to escort you." My stomach dropped. "Escort me? To where? A dungeon?" "Look, I said I was sorry about the elbow." "Well, I didn't say it, but I implied it. Mostly." "To the penthouse suite," Hollis corrected smoothly. "We have business to discuss." "I'm working," I insisted, finally ducking under his arm and taking a step toward the hallway. "I can't just leave. I have a contract. And I own the building, Hollis said calmly to my retreating back. I ignored him and speed walked toward the kitchen. Tactical retreat, I muttered to myself. Just blend in. Hide in the walk-in freezer. I made it exactly 10 feet before two mountains in suits stepped out from behind a curtain, blocking the hallway. They were identical, bald, and roughly the size of vending machines. Ms. Calder, the one on the left said. It wasn't a question. I'm busy, I said, trying to sidestep. Vegetarian emergency. Mr. Lyle insists, the one on the right said. His tone was polite, but his stance said, I can lift a car, don't test me. I'm really not available for meetings right now. I tried again, looking for an escape route. The only other door led to the laundry chute. Ms. Calder? Hollis's voice came from behind me. I turned. He was leaning against the wall where I had left him, arms crossed over that magnificent, bruised chest. He looked entirely too amused. You can walk to the suite, or Arthur and Martha here can carry you. I looked at the guards. Your name is Martha? I asked the one on the right. He grunted. Mark, but the boss likes to rhyme. I looked back at Hollis. He shrugged. It helps me remember. I let out a groan of frustration. Fine, I'll walk. But if the West Coast Alpha eats a waiter because there's no tofu, that is on your conscience, not mine. I can live with that, Hollis said, pushing off the wall. He gestured toward the private elevator at the end of the hall. After you. I marched past him, head held high, clicking my heels on the linoleum. I was being kidnapped by the king. The least I could do was look annoyed about it. But as I stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, sealing us in a box of mirrors and silence, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the electric tension radiating off the man standing just behind my shoulder. Do not, I warned, watching his reflection in the gold-tinted mirror. Sneak up on me in here. Hollis met my eyes in the reflection. I wouldn't dream of it, Sophie. When I catch you, I want you to see me coming. Chapter 4. The penthouse suite was less of a room and more of a small sovereign nation. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a fireplace large enough to roast a whole ox, and a white grand piano that looked like it had never been played. I stood in the center of the plush Persian rug, clutching my clipboard, refusing to be impressed. Nice place, I deadpanned. Very subtle. Screams, man of the people. Hollis walked past me, shedding his suit jacket. He tossed it carelessly onto a velvet armchair. The movement pulled his white dress shirt tight across his back, revealing the terrifying definition of his muscles. He undid his cufflinks, rolling up his sleeves to reveal forearms that looked like they could strangle a fear. Drink? He offered, walking to a crystal decanter on the bar. I'm on the clock, I said stiffly. And I don't drink with clients. I'm not a client, Hollis said, pouring a glass of amber liquid. He turned to face me, leaning back against the bar. I'm the victim of a workplace assault. Alleged assault, I corrected. It was self-defense. You were lurking with intent. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. Intent to what? To supervise aggressively. He chuckled, a dark, rich sound. Sophie, you are the first person in 10 years who hasn't looked at me like I was about to rip their throat out. You elbowed me. You ordered me to fix a table. You insulted my suit. It was a constructive critique, I muttered, crossing my arms. And if you brought me here to fire me, just do it. I have a backup plan. I'll go sell artisanal jam in Vermont. I don't want to fire you, Hollis said, setting the glass down. He walked toward me, closing the distance. I want to hire you. I blinked. I'm already hired. I'm running your summit, which, by the way, is currently unsupervised. Small thinking, he dismissed. I'm talking about a personal contract. My public image is stagnant. As you pointed out, I am stiff. People fear me, but they don't connect with me. The polls show that my approval rating is high, but my relatability score is 0. You're an alpha king who lives in a sky palace, I said. You aren't relatable. You're terrifying." "Exactly," he said. "I need someone to humanize me. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me when my tie is crooked. Someone who will elbow me when I'm being an arrogant prick." He stopped 2 feet in front of me. "I want you to coordinate my rebranding, a 1-month exclusive contract. You manage my schedule, my appearances, my wardrobe. You fix the broken things in my administration." I stared at him. "You want me to be your, what, babysitter? Stylist? Handler?" he corrected softy. "I want you to handle me, Sophie." The double meaning hung in the air, heavy and thick. My breath hitched. "No," I said, backing up a step. "Absolutely not. I run an agency, Mr. Lyle. I have other clients. I can't drop everything to follow you around and tell you to smile more. I'm not a personal assistant." "You're right," he agreed. "You're not. That's why I'm offering to pay your agency triple its annual projected revenue for 1 month of your time." My mouth opened, then closed. Triple revenue? That would pay off my student loans, my parents' mortgage, and buy the new office space downtown. I faltered. "That's ridiculous. You can't just buy people." "I'm buying your expertise," he said smoothly, "and your time, exclusive rights." "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "It's unethical. And frankly, our working styles are incompatible. I like schedules and order. You like sneaking up on people and making cryptic threats." Hollis's expression hardened slightly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once. "What are you doing?" I asked suspiciously. "I'm just checking the current stock price of Calder Associates Event Planning," he said casually. "It's a private LLC, isn't it? But I believe your business partner, Dave, has been looking to sell his majority share." My blood ran cold. "Don't you dare." Hollis looked up, his face a mask of calm, ruthless determination. "Say yes to the contract, Sophie. Or I buy Dave's shares in the next 10 minutes. I become the majority owner of your company, and then I assign you to this project as your boss." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Either way, you belong to me for the next 30 days. The only choice you have is whether you want to be a partner or an employee." He held out his hand. "Do we have a deal?" I looked at his hand. I looked at his smug, beautiful, infuriating face. I wanted to elbow him again. Harder. "You are a tyrant," I hissed. "I am a king," he countered. Tick-tock, Sophie. Chapter 5. I signed the contract. I didn't sign it with a flourish or a smile. I signed it with the jagged, aggressive pen strokes of a woman who was plotting psychological warfare. If Hollis Lyle wanted a handler, I was going to handle him so hard he'd be begging for his old, boring life back within 48 hours. I called it Operation Death by Bureaucracy. "Excellent," Hollis said, tucking the contract into his jacket pocket as if it were a love letter. "When do we start?" "Now," I said, checking my watch. It was 11 p.m. "I'll see you at 5 a.m. sharp for our intake strategy session. Bring a pen, and wear comfortable shoes. We're doing a walking audit of your entire estate grounds." I expected him to balk. I expected him to negotiate for a reasonable hour, like 9:08 a.m. Instead, he just nodded. 5:08 a.m. I'll send a car." "No car," I corrected. "I drive myself. Independence is part of my brand." 3 days later, I was the one regretting my life choices. I had scheduled 4 meetings a day. I had flooded his inbox with queries about tonal consistency and email signatures. I had forced him to sit through a 3-hour presentation on the psychological impact of serif versus sans serif fonts in diplomatic decrees. And the man was loving it. It was 6:00 a.m. on Thursday. We were in his office, a room that smelled of leather and power. I had spread 50 different swatches of high-end paper across his massive oak desk. "Okay," I said, pointing to 2 identical sheets of cream-colored paper with my laser pointer. "Option A is eggshell cloud. Option B is whisper of vanilla. Option A says, I am strong but approachable. Option B says, I am wealthy but I might listen to your problems. Choose carefully. This will define your winter correspondence strategy." I looked at him, waiting for him to snap. Waiting for him to scream, "It's just paper, Sophie!" and fire me. Hollis leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his chin resting on his interlaced fingers. He looked fresh, alert, and irritatingly handsome in a casual gray sweater that hugged his biceps. Option B, he said decisively. The vanilla undertone suggests warmth. I need warmth. I blinked. You can actually see the difference? I have superior vision, Sophie. I'm a wolf, he reminded me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. And I appreciate the attention to detail. Most people assume I don't care about the texture of my stationery. You know I do. He reached under his desk and pulled out a thermal cup. Oat milk latte, 2 pumps of hazelnut, extra hot, no foam. He slid it across the desk toward me. I stared at the cup. That was my exact, complicated, obnoxious coffee order. I hadn't told him. I hadn't even told his assistant. How did you know? I whispered. I observe, he said simply. You were dragging this morning. I thought you might need fuel for your interrogation. I took the cup, my fingers brushing against his warm hand. A spark, literal static electricity, zapped us both. I jerked my hand back. He didn't flinch. I'm not interrogating you, I defended, though the coffee smelled like heaven. I'm rebranding you. It's a process. It feels like a test, Hollis murmured. He stood up and walked around the desk. He didn't stop until he was standing right next to my chair, leaning his hip against the edge of the desk, looking down at me. You're throwing everything you have at me. Early mornings, trivial decisions, endless paperwork. You want me to break. You want me to say you're too much trouble. I took a sip of the coffee to hide my expression. I'm just being thorough. You're trying to make me run, Hollis said softly. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my jawline for a fraction of a second too long. But here is the thing about predators, Sophie. We don't run from a challenge, we chase it. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a rough whisper near my ear. Keep pushing me. I enjoy the resistance. Chapter 6. The resistance, as it turned out, did not extend to aviation physics. Pack a bag, Hollis had texted me at noon. Site visit. 1 hour. I assumed site visit meant a drive to a local pack territory. I did not assume it meant boarding a Gulfstream G650 with gold-plated seatbelt buckles. Where are we going? I asked, buckling myself into the white leather seat across from him. You have a gala to prepare for on Tuesday. We have to approve the floral arrangements. The flowers can wait, Hollis said, not looking up from his tablet. I need to inspect the northern sanctuary. It's part of the humanizing effort. I need to be seen caring about nature. Fine, I grumbled, pulling out my laptop. But I'm charging travel hours. The flight was smooth for the first hour. I managed to answer 12 emails and ignore the way Hollis's legs kept brushing against mine in the narrow aisle. Then, the sky turned black. The plane dropped. Not a little dip. A stomach-lurching, gravity-defying drop that made the champagne glasses rattle in the galley. Oh God, I gasped, clutching the armrests so hard my knuckles turned white. It's just a pressure pocket, Hollis said calmly. Then the plane lurched sideways, shook violently, and dropped again. My fierce professional facade crumbled instantly. I hate flying. I hate turbulence. I have a distinct, irrational fear of falling out of the sky in a metal tube. We're going to die, I wheezed, squeezing my eyes shut. I didn't clear my browser history. My mother is going to find my stash of romance novels. Sophie. Hollis's voice cut through the panic. I'm going to be a smear on a mountain, I hyperventilated. I never even got to tell Dave I hate his mustache. Suddenly, a warm, heavy weight settled over my trembling hands. I opened one eye. Hollis had unbuckled his seatbelt, which was definitely against regulations, and was kneeling in the aisle in front of me. He covered my hands with his massive ones. Look at me, he commanded. Not a request. An alpha order. I looked. His eyes were steady, anchoring me. I will not let this plane fall, he said, his voice calm and absolute. You are with me. Nothing touches you when you are with me. Not even gravity. It was an absurd statement. He couldn't control the weather. But looking at him, solid, immovable, and completely unafraid, my lungs remembered how to work. He didn't let go. He rubbed circles on the back of my hand with his thumb, distracting me from the shaking cabin. He started asking me mundane questions to keep my brain engaged. "Tell me about Dave's mustache," he said. It's a handlebar," I squeaked. "It's tragic." "Tragic," Hollis repeated, a small smile playing on his lips. "Go on." He stayed there, kneeling on the floor of a shaking jet, holding my hands for 45 minutes until the air smoothed out. When the pilot finally announced our descent, I was sweaty, exhausted, and confusingly attached to the feeling of his skin against mine. "We're down," Hollis whispered, finally releasing my hands. I took a shaky breath, pulling my hands back and trying to regain my dignity. "Right. Good. Efficient crisis management." Hollis stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked out the window at the swirling white void outside. "Welcome to the sanctuary," he said. I looked out the window. "Hollis, that's a lot of snow." "It is," he agreed. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Lyle, the storm front moved faster than predicted. We're grounded. I can't take off again until this clears. Maybe 2 days." I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up, looking at the isolated, snow-covered log mansion in the distance. 2 days? Do you have staff here? A chef? A housekeeper? Hollis looked at me, and for the first time, he looked a little sheepish. "I gave them the week off," he admitted. "I wanted quiet." I stared at him. "So it's just us? In a blizzard? In a mansion?" "It appears so," he said. "And let me guess," I said, narrowing my eyes. "There's a problem with the heating in the guest wing?" "No," Hollis said honestly. "The heating is fine, but I think the refrigerator is empty." Chapter 7. The refrigerator was not empty. It contained a bottle of champagne, a jar of olives, and a carton of eggs that expired in 2024. "You are a billionaire," I said, holding up the ancient eggs. "How do you live like this?" "I don't usually cook," Hollis said, leaning against the marble island of the massive industrial kitchen. He had shed his jacket and tie, and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, exposing the hollow of his throat. It was distracting. "I have people." "Well, your people aren't here," I said, tossing the eggs into the trash. "And I'm starving. If I don't eat, I get hangry. And if I get hangry, I might accidentally coup your government." "There's a pantry," Hollis offered. "Pasta, tomato sauce. I can make pasta." "You?" I scoffed. "You can't even pick a font without supervision." "I can boil water, Sophie." He was wrong. 30 minutes later, there was flour on the floor, sauce on the counter, and Hollis was staring intently at a pot of boiling water as if he could intimidate the pasta into cooking faster. "You're crowding the noodles," I said, hip-checking him out of the way. "Move. You're useless. Go sit down." "I am the Alpha King," he grumbled, but he moved, letting me take over the stove. "I don't get bossed around in my own kitchen." "You do tonight," I said, stirring the sauce. "Chop that onion, and don't mangle it. Dice, small cubes." I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He picked up the knife. His movements were precise, lethal. He attacked the onion like it was an enemy of the state. "So," he said, the rhythmic chop, chop, chop filling the silence. "Is this part of the rebranding? Domesticity?" "No," I said, tasting the sauce. "Needs garlic. This is survival. But it's different." "Different good or different bad?" I turned to look at him. He had stopped chopping. He was watching me, his eyes dark in the dim kitchen light. The storm was howling outside, creating a cocoon of silence around us. "Just different," I said softly. "You aren't scary when you're holding a spatula." "I was never scary to you," Hollis countered. He put the knife down and walked around the island. He stopped in front of me. "That first night, in the hallway, you weren't scared. You were annoyed." "I didn't know who you were," I whispered. "And now you do," he said. He took a step closer, crowding me against the stove. The heat from the burner was behind me. The heat from him was in front. Does it change things? Do you want to bow now? I don't bow, I said, tilting my chin up to meet his gaze. Good, he murmured. I hated the bowing. I liked the elbow. You're a masochist, I said, my voice shaky. No. Hollis shook his head slowly. I'm just numb. Everyone touches me with soft hands, Sophie, or they don't touch me at all. You hit me, it was real, I could feel it. He took my hand, the hand holding the wooden spoon, and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. I could feel the heavy, steady thud of it beneath the muscle. It's right here, he whispered. Where you hit me, do it again. Hollis, I warned, but I didn't pull my hand away. Elbow me, he dared, his voice rough, dropping to that dangerous octave that made my knees weak. Push me away, show me you don't want this. I can't, I admitted, the truth slipping out. Why? Because, I said, looking at his lips, I don't want to push you away. Hollis let out a low growl, a sound that was pure wolf. He reached out, grabbing my waist and hoisting me up onto the marble counter, stepping between my knees. Then don't, he said. And he leaned in. Chapter 8. The universe, I decided, had impeccable comedic timing, or perhaps it just hated me. Hollis's lips were a millimeter from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off him, smell the cedar and rain scent of his skin, and my eyes were fluttering shut, ready to make the worst, most unprofessional, most delicious mistake of my career. Click. The kitchen plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. The hum of the refrigerator died. The storm outside roared louder, suddenly the only sound in the massive house. You have got to be kidding me, I whispered against his mouth. Hollis didn't pull away. In the dark, his hands tightened on my waist. Generator, he murmured, his voice a vibration against my chin. It should kick in, eventually. Eventually? I squeaked. Hollis, I can't see my hand in front of my face, and you are technically holding me hostage on a kitchen island. I see you perfectly, he replied, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. Wolf vision, of course. Your pulse is racing, Sophie. That's fear, I lied. Pure terror. Put me down. He didn't put me down. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me through the dark house like I was a sack of very expensive potatoes, until he deposited me on the plush rug in front of the massive fireplace in the great room. A moment later, a match struck, and the fire roared to life, casting dancing shadows across his sharp features. We waited out, he said, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a decanter on the mantel. The storm is too heavy for the backup lines. We sat on the rug, the fire crackling between us. The tension from the kitchen hadn't dissipated. It had just changed shape. It was softer now. Heavy. Let's play a game, I said, trying to distract myself from the way the firelight played on his cheekbones, to keep us from freezing to death. It's 70 degrees in here, Sophie, he drawled, handing me a glass. But fine, what game? 20 questions, no lies. I ask, you answer, then you ask. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of his glass. Dangerous. I accept. You first. I thought about it. I could ask about his politics, his wealth, his pack strategy. Why did you let me elbow you? I asked. Really? You could have stopped me. I was bored, he said simply. I live a life of scripted interactions. You went off script. It was refreshing. My turn. Why do you hide behind that clipboard? I choked on my whiskey. I don't hide. You do, he countered. You use efficiency as a shield. You organize other people's chaos so you don't have to deal with your own. What are you afraid of? That's 2 questions, I deflected. Answer the second one. I looked into the fire. Control, I admitted softly. I'm afraid of losing it. My life is mine. I built it. If I let someone like you in, an alpha, you consume everything. You take up all the air in the room. I don't want to be a footnote in your biography. I want to be the author of my own. Hollis was silent for a long time. Is that what you think I do? Consume? You're a king, Hollis. It's what you are. I am a weapon, he corrected, his voice bleak. I am a symbol. The pack needs a strong leader, so I became iron. I don't have friends, Sophie. I have subjects. I have liabilities. I have enemies. He looked at me, his golden eyes raw. You are the first person in a decade who hasn't asked me for a favor. I asked you to tape a carpet, I reminded him gently. He smiled, a genuine, tired smile. Yes, you did. The conversation drifted into quieter waters. Favorite books, worst childhood memories. The silence between words grew comfortable, stretching out like the shadows on the wall. The whiskey and the warmth of the fire made my eyelids heavy. I didn't mean to, but I leaned my head against his shoulder. He stiffened for a second, then relaxed, his arm coming around me, pulling me into his side. Just resting my eyes, I mumbled. Sleep, Sophie, he whispered into my hair. I've got the watch. I didn't think I would sleep, but the steady rhythm of his heart against my ear was a lullaby I couldn't resist. I woke up hours later. The fire had died down to embers. Sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the curtains. I was alone on the rug, covered by a heavy wool blanket. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Hollis? I heard his voice from the hallway. Low, lethal, cold. I don't care who your source is, Hollis was saying. If you run that story implying she slept her way into the contract, I will buy your publication, fire your entire editorial staff, and turn your office building into a cat shelter. Do you understand me? I froze. She is the best consultant on the continent, Hollis growled. She is untouchable. Mention her name with anything other than reverence, and I will end you. He hung up. I sat there, heart pounding. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting me. Chapter 9. The flight back was silent. Not the comfortable silence of the fireplace, but a jagged, brittle silence that felt like walking on broken glass. Hollis was back in his suit, typing furiously on his tablet. The mountain Hollis, the one who made bad pasta and let me sleep on his chest, was gone. In his place was the king. And I was just the consultant again. Good, I told myself. This is good. Boundaries, professionalism. I can't fall for a client, especially not one who threatens newspaper editors before breakfast. When we landed, the city rushed back in. Noise, traffic, emails. My phone exploded with notifications the second we hit the tarmac. I'll have a car take you to your office, Hollis said, not looking at me as we deplaned. We have the budget meeting at 2 p.m. Right, I said, clutching my bag. 2 p.m. I'll have the spreadsheets ready. Sophie, he said, stopping at the bottom of the air stair. He looked at me, searching for something. Thank you for the rescue, I said stiffly, and the hospitality. Your Highness. His eyes narrowed. A flash of irritation crossed his face. Don't. Don't what? Don't retreat, he warned. We aren't back at square one. We have to be, I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Square one is safe. Square one pays the bills. I got into the waiting sedan before he could argue. By 2 p.m., I had rebuilt my fortress. I was wearing my sharpest blazer, my hair was pulled back so tight it gave me a facelift, and I had prepared a 20-page deck on fiscal responsibility. I was ready to be boring. I was ready to be invisible. I walked into his office at the royal headquarters. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city. Good afternoon, Mr. Lyle, I said briskly, setting up my laptop. If we could turn our attention to page 4, line item 6, floral expenditures. Hollis turned slowly. He didn't look at the screen. He looked at me. Is that what we're doing? We are reviewing the budget, I said, clicking my pen. It is my job. Your job is to manage my image, he said, walking toward the conference table. And my image requires authenticity. You are being fake. I am being professional, I snapped. Something we seem to have forgotten in the woods. I didn't forget anything, he said, his voice dropping. I remember every second. Well, forget it, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It was a weather anomaly. We are back in the real world now. And in the real world, you are the Alpha King, and I am the hired help. So, Your Highness, if you could please sit down. Hollis moved. Fast. 1 second he was by the window, the next he was standing directly in front of me, his hands planting on the table on either side of my laptop, boxing me in. Stop calling me that, he growled. It's your title, I argued, refusing to back down, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. It's who you are. It's a title for strangers, he hissed. I am not a stranger to you. I held you while you slept. I know you're afraid of thunder. You know I can't cook. We are past titles. We can't be, I cried, frustration bubbling over. Don't you get it? If I'm not the hired help, then what am I? I'm just a vulnerability. I'm a target. I can't be that Hollis. I need the walls. I need the title. You don't need walls with me, he said, his intensity burning through my defenses. And I don't give a damn about protocol. I do, I shouted. So please, Your Highness, just look at the spreadsheet. Hollis leaned in, his face inches from mine. The air in the room crackled with so much tension I could taste it. Call me that again, he whispered, his voice dark, promising, and terrifyingly seductive. Call me Your Highness one more time, Sophie, and I will kiss you. Right here, in front of the glass walls, in front of your entire board of directors, in front of the world. My mouth went dry. You wouldn't. Try me, he challenged. Give me an excuse to claim you. I am begging you. Chapter 10. I didn't call him Your Highness. I didn't call him anything. I pointed at the spreadsheet, mumbled something about fiscal solvency, and fled the room as soon as the meeting was technically over. I spent the next 2 days hiding in my own office, buried under paperwork, jumping every time my phone rang. I was safe. I was bored. I was miserable. Then she walked in. You can smell money. It smells like imported leather and perfume that costs more than a Honda Civic. Lady Genevieve of the Eastern Pack didn't just walk into my reception area. She floated in, followed by 2 assistants carrying her purse and her ego. She was stunning, of course. Tall, blonde, perfect. The kind of woman who was bred in a laboratory to be an alpha queen. Can I help you? I asked, walking out from my office, smoothing my skirt. You must be the planner, she said, looking me up and down with a sneer that was polite enough to be deniable but sharp enough to draw blood. Sophie, is it? Ms. Calder, I corrected. And yes, how can I help the Eastern Pack? Oh, this isn't pack business, she said, waving a manicured hand. I'm hosting the Moonlight Charity Ball next week. It's a very exclusive event. Hollis will be there, naturally. She said his name with a possessive familiarity that made my stomach twist. And I need the best, she continued, flashing a smile that didn't reach her ice blue eyes. I heard you're the flavor of the month. Hollis seems amused by you. So I want you to plan it. I narrowed my eyes. My firm is fully booked. I'll pay double, she said, and I'll invite you. As a guest. I don't need charity, Lady Genevieve. No, she stepped closer, lowering her voice. But you need perspective. You see, dear, Hollis likes shiny new toys, but he always comes home to quality. I want you to plan the night where I announce our alignment. I want you to have a front row seat to see where you really stand. It was a trap. She wanted to hire me to serve her, to rub my face in her compatibility with Hollis. She wanted to remind me that I was staff, and she was royalty. My pride screamed at me to kick her out, but my stubbornness, the part of me that elbowed kings, woke up. Triple, I said. Genevieve blinked. Excuse me? Triple the fee, I said, crossing my arms. And full creative control. If I'm going to plan your party, I'm going to do it my way. She smirked. Done. I look forward to seeing you fetch my drinks, Ms. Calder. She left. I sat down, shaking. I had just agreed to plan my own heartbreak. 20 minutes later, my office door flew open. It didn't open. It slammed against the wall. Hollis stood there. He looked furious. His eyes were glowing a faint, dangerous amber. "You took the job," he accused, storming in. "News travels fast," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "She's playing you, Sophie," he snarled, slamming his hands on my desk. "Genevieve is a viper. She wants to humiliate you. Cancel the contract." "I can't," I said calmly. "I signed it. Triple fee. It's good business." "It's not business. It's a power play." He paced the small room, looking like a tiger in a cage. "She thinks she can use you to get to me. I won't allow it. I'll ban her from the premises." "You will do no such thing." I stood up, meeting his rage with my own. "I am not a damsel, Hollis. I don't need you to swoop in and save me from the mean girl. I can handle Genevieve." "You don't know her," he argued. "She will tear you apart socially. She will make you look like a servant." "I am a servant," I shouted. "That's my job. I serve. And if you interfere, if you try to protect me again, you are proving her right. You are proving that I'm just your little pet project who can't stand on her own 2 feet." Hollis stopped pacing. He looked at me, his chest heaving. "Is that what you think this is? You think I see you as a pet?" "I think you see me as something to fix," I said, my voice breaking. "But I'm not broken, Hollis, and I fight my own battles." "Fine," he spat, backing away toward the door. The hurt in his eyes was devastating, but he masked it with cold indifference. "Fight her. But when she comes for your throat, don't expect me to hold her back." "I wouldn't dream of it," I whispered. He slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. Chapter 11. I had a plan. The plan was simple: invisibility. For the Moonlight Charity Ball, I had ordered my standard event coordinator stealth mode outfit. It was a black pantsuit tailored to be professional but utterly forgettable. It was the kind of outfit that said, "I am here to hold a clipboard, not a conversation." I had paid extra for rush delivery to ensure my armor would be ready. So when the courier arrived at my office holding a massive white box embossed with the royal crest, I knew my plan was dead in the water. "I didn't order this," I told the courier, refusing to sign the tablet. "Priority delivery from the palace," the courier said, bored. "Sign here or I have to take it back and tell Mr. Lyle you rejected a state gift. He mentioned something about buying the courier company if that happened." I signed, aggressively. I dragged the box into my private dressing room and ripped the lid off. I expected a prank. Maybe a maid's uniform, maybe a neon sign that said, "Hired help." I pulled back the tissue paper and stopped breathing. It wasn't a prank. It was a weapon. The gown was a fluid cascade of midnight blue silk that shifted to silver under the light like moonlight hitting dark water. It was strapless, structured, and terrifyingly beautiful. There was a note resting on the bodice. "The suit is boring. Wear this." I am not wearing this," I whispered to the empty room. "I look like a Disney princess who went to law school." But curiosity is a traitor. 10 minutes later, I was standing in front of the full-length mirror, the silk pooling around my feet. The dress fit as if it had been stitched onto my skin. It hugged every curve, the corset back cinching my waist, the slit in the skirt high enough to be dangerous but low enough to be classy. I looked powerful. I didn't look like staff. I looked like someone who owned the building. The door to the dressing room clicked open. I spun around, clutching the bodice. "Occupied! I'm changing!" Hollis stood in the doorway. He froze. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was in casual wear, dark jeans and a black t-shirt. But the effect was no less commanding. He looked at me, and his eyes did that thing where the gold swallowed the pupil entirely. He didn't speak. He just stared, his gaze traveling from my bare shoulders down to the slit in the skirt, then back up to my eyes. The air in the small room suddenly felt heavy, charged with enough electricity to jumpstart a car. "You," he said, his voice rough, "are not wearing the pantsuit." "I was testing the zipper," I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm going to take it off. It's too much. I can't work in this, Hollis. Where do I put my radio? Where do I clip my master key?" Hollis stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "You don't put a radio on that dress, Sophie. You don't work in that dress." Exactly, I said, reaching for the zipper at my back, though my hands were shaking. That's why I can't wear it. I am the coordinator. I need pockets. Stop, he commanded softly. He walked over to me, brushing my hands away. I thought he was going to unzip me. Instead, he rested his hands on my waist, his thumbs tracing the line of the silk. His touch burned through the fabric. You aren't going as the coordinator, he said, his voice low and uncompromising. You are going as my guest. We talked about this, I argued, breathless. Lady Genevieve hired me. I have a contract. If I show up as a guest, she wins. She proves I'm just your flavor of the month. If you show up in a black suit hiding in the shadows, she wins, Hollis countered. She wants you to be invisible. She wants you to be a servant. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. Don't be invisible, Sophie. I spent 10 years looking for someone real. Now that I've found you, I'm not letting you fade into the background. I'm not a queen, Hollis, I whispered, terrified by how much I wanted to lean into him. I'm the girl who elbows people in hallways. Then be that girl, he murmured, his lips brushing my ear. Be the girl who elbows the king. But do it in this dress. Wear the dress, Sophie, or I will cancel the ball. You can't cancel the ball, I said weakly. The catering is non-refundable. Watch me. Chapter 12. The ballroom was empty, vast, and echoing. It was 2 a.m. the night before the event. The polished marble floor reflected the crystal chandeliers above like a frozen lake. I was on my hands and knees taping down a rogue electrical cord near the bandstand. I was wearing leggings and an oversized hoodie, trying to get the grunt work done before the chaos of tomorrow. The acoustics are terrible in this corner. A deep voice rumbled from the center of the room. I didn't jump. I was getting used to him materializing out of thin air. I sat back on my heels and blew a strand of hair out of my face. Hollis was standing in the middle of the dance floor, looking up at the ceiling. It's a echo trap, I agreed. I put extra sound dampeners behind the curtains. It should hold. Come here, he said. I'm busy, I said, grabbing my roll of gaffer tape. This cord is a tripping hazard. If a duchess falls, I get sued. The cord is fine, Hollis said. He held out a hand. Come here, Sophie. I need to test the floor. Test the floor? I stood up, dusting off my knees. It's marble. It's solid. It's not going anywhere. I need to test the friction coefficient, he said with a straight face. For the waltz, it's a safety protocol. I rolled my eyes, but I walked over to him. You are ridiculous. There is no friction coefficient protocol. There is now, he said. He took my hand. His palm was warm, rough, and engulfed mine completely. He pulled me in, not jerkily, but with a steady, inexorable gravity. One hand settled on my waist, the other held my fingers. I don't dance, I warned, looking at his chest because looking at his eyes was dangerous. I lead. It's an occupational hazard. Not tonight, Hollis murmured. He began to move. He didn't wait for music. He hummed a low, slow melody under his breath, something classical and haunting. He moved with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for a man of his size. He was liquid power. I stumbled at first, trying to anticipate him, trying to steer. Stop thinking, he whispered. Follow me. I hate following, I muttered, but my body was betraying me. It was syncing with his. We spun slowly across the empty floor. The world narrowed down to the heat of his hand on my back, the scent of him, the sound of his heart fiat. For a moment, the contracts, the rivals, the social hierarchy, it all dissolved. You look tired, he said softly. I'm fine, I lied. Just pre-game jitters. You're terrified, he corrected. Of Genevieve, of tomorrow. I'm not afraid of her, I said, looking up at him finally. I'm afraid of what happens after. When the ball is over, when the contract ends, when you go back to being the king and I go back to being the help. Hollis stopped dancing. We were standing in the center of the room, breathless. He didn't let go of my waist. The contract is a piece of paper, he said, intensity burning in his gaze. This isn't paper. He lowered his head. His gaze dropped to my lips. The air between us sizzled. He was going to kiss me. And God help me, I was going to let him. I wanted him to ruin me. I wanted him to erase every boundary I had ever built. He tilted his head, closing the distance. I felt his breath on my lips. Panic, sharp and cold, pierced the fog. If he kissed me now, I would lose. I would be the cliché. The commoner who slept with the king and got discarded. I would prove Genevieve right. I pulled back. Hard. Hollis froze, his lips inches from mine. I can't, I whispered, stepping out of his hold. I can't do this, Hollis. Not while I'm on the payroll. Not while everyone is watching to see if I fail. Hollis straightened slowly. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by a dark, simmering hunger. He didn't look rejected. He looked determined. You think a payroll is what stops me? He asked, his voice low. It stops me, I said, hugging myself. Please, just let me do my job. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Do your job, Sophie. Plan the event. But plan on this. I am done waiting for the contract to expire. He walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Plan on me changing your mind. Chapter 13. The ballroom was a Shark Tank in sequins. The winter solstice ball was the apex of the social calendar. The air smelled of expensive perfume, nervous sweat, and ambition. 300 of the continent's most powerful shifters were drinking champagne and judging each other. And I was in the middle of it. I was wearing the dress. The midnight blue silk shimmered under the lights, making me feel like a warrior queen. But I had accessorized it with my armor. A headset clamped over one ear and a clipboard clutched to my chest. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't mingling. I was working. Sector 4, clear, I murmured into the mic. Waiters, refill the canapes near the Eastern delegation. They look hungry. I stood in the shadows near a pillar, scanning the room. My eyes kept drifting to the dais at the front. Hollis sat on the velvet throne. He looked bored, lethal, and devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo that fit perfectly. I had checked the measurements myself. He wasn't talking to the diplomats fawning over him. He was scanning the room. Every time his eyes found me, a jolt went through my spine. He would hold my gaze for a second, just long enough to make me blush, before looking away. It was a secret game. A silent tether. Then, the shark arrived. Lady Genevieve made her entrance. She was wearing red, bright, aggressive, blood red. She swept into the room like she owned it, her entourage trailing behind her. She walked straight to the dais, curtsied low to Hollis, and whispered something that made him stiffen. He didn't smile at her, but she smiled at the room as if he had just proposed. She turned and scanned the crowd. Her eyes locked on me. Her smile widened. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had found the wounded gazelle. She walked toward me. The crowd parted. The music seemed to dim. Sophie, she purred, stopping in front of me. She looked at my dress. Her eyes narrowed with jealousy, but she masked it quickly. Charming. You almost look like you belong here. Almost. Lady Genevieve, I said politely, clicking my pen. Is everything to your satisfaction? The lighting? The temperature? The service is lacking, she said loudly. Heads turned. My glass is empty. I'll flag down a waiter for you, I said, reaching for my radio. No, she stopped me. You do it. Fetch me a drink, a Pinot Noir, and be quick about it. The people nearby went silent. She was treating the event coordinator, the woman wearing a royal gown, like a barmaid. It was a test. If I obeyed, I was a servant. If I refused, I was rude. I took a breath. Of course, one Pinot Noir. I walked to the bar, my head high. I returned with the glass. Here you go, I said, offering it to her. Genevieve took the glass. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with malice. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she tilted the glass. Red wine splashed across the polished marble floor, missing my dress by inches but creating a massive crimson puddle between us. The sound of the glass shattering on the floor echoed through the silent room. "Oops," Genevieve said, her voice dripping with fake concern. Then she snapped her fingers. Snap, snap. "Cleaner," she barked, pointing at the floor. "Spot check, now, before I ruin my shoes." The entire ballroom went dead silent. The music stopped. Every eye was on me. She wasn't just asking me to clean, she was asking me to kneel. I felt a wave of cold fury rising in my chest. I looked up at the dais. Hollis was standing. He had risen from the throne, his hands curled into fists at his sides. His eyes were glowing a bright, furious gold. He took a step down the stairs, looking ready to rip Genevieve's head off. "Hollis!" Genevieve called out, laughing lightly. "Your help is so clumsy." Hollis took another step, a growl building in his throat. I held up my hand. "Stop." I locked eyes with him across the room. "Let me handle this." He hesitated. He looked like he was in physical pain from holding back, but he stopped. He waited. I turned back to Genevieve. I didn't look at the mess. I looked at her. "You dropped something," I said calmly. "I said clean it up," she hissed, her smile vanishing. "You work for me." I looked at my clipboard. I looked at my watch. Then I adjusted my microphone so my voice would carry. "Actually," I said, my voice ringing clear and steady through the silent hall, "I work for the king." Chapter 14. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 300 wolves held their breath. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of red wine soaking into the priceless Italian marble. Lady Genevieve stood there, her finger still raised in that snapping gesture, a smirk of triumphant cruelty plastered on her face. She expected me to crumble. She expected the hired help to drop to her knees and scrub, tears in her eyes, while the court laughed. She expected Hollis to sit on his throne and let it happen, because that's what kings do. They let the hierarchy crush the weak. She had made one critical miscalculation. She assumed I was weak, and she assumed I cared about her social standing more than I cared about venue contracts. "I work for the king," I repeated, my voice steady, amplified by the room's acoustics. "And more specifically, I work for the venue. And the venue has very strict policies regarding guests who cannot handle their alcohol." Genevieve's smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" I didn't look at her. I looked at my clipboard, flipping a page with a loud, crisp snap. I clicked my pen. "Clause 14, Section B," I recited, pretending to read, though I knew the contract by heart. "Any guest demonstrating erratic behavior, intentional property damage, or public intoxication will be subject to immediate removal from the premises to ensure the safety of the pack dignitaries." I looked up at her, tilting my head in mock concern. "You snapped your fingers at me, Lady Genevieve. You spilled a vintage Pinot Noir. You're shouting at staff. These are classic signs of intoxication. Have you been overserved?" The crowd gasped. I hadn't just refused her order. I had publicly accused a duchess of being drunk and disorderly. "I am not drunk," Genevieve screeched, her face flushing a color that clashed horribly with her red dress. "I am a duchess. I am the future queen. How dare you speak to me like that? Hollis, tell her!" She spun toward the dais, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Tell this servant to know her place." I didn't flinch. I tapped my earpiece, my eyes locking onto the two large shadows standing by the exit. "Security to Sector 4, I said calmly into the mic. "We have a code red. A guest is belligerent and damaging the venue. Potential liability hazard. Please escort her to the cooling-off area or the parking lot, whichever is closer." "You can't do that," Genevieve yelled, stomping her foot, which splashed more wine onto her own hem. "Do you know who my father is?" "I don't care who your father is," I said, my voice dropping to a cool, professional tone that cut through her hysteria like a knife. "I care about the carpet, and right now, you are a stain on the evening." The heavy double doors swung open. Arthur and Mark, the vending machine-sized guards who had once blocked my path, marched into the room. They weren't looking at Genevieve. They were looking at me, waiting for the order. I pointed my pen at Genevieve. "Remove the hazard, boys. I ordered. Chapter 15. Genevieve looked from me to the guards, and then to Hollis. Real fear finally flickered in her eyes. She had pushed a boundary, thinking she was immune. She was about to learn that in my ballroom, the only immunity belonged to the person holding the microphone. "Hollis!" she cried out, her voice shrill and desperate. "Stop them! She's humiliating me! She's kicking me out of your ball!" Hollis descended the stairs of the dais. He moved slowly, like a predator stalking through tall grass. The room parted for him. Every eye watched him. This was the moment. He had to choose: the highborn duchess who offered him political power, or the event planner who had just elbowed the social hierarchy in the gut. He stopped 3 feet from us. He looked at the puddle of wine. He looked at Genevieve, who was practically hyperventilating. Then he looked at me. His face was unreadable. Stone cold. "Ms. Calder," he rumbled. The sound of his voice vibrated in my chest. "Yes, sir?" I asked, standing my ground, though my knees were trembling under the silk gown. "Is this guest violating the terms of the event contract?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied instantly. Clause 14B, disorderly conduct. She is disrupting the flow of the evening and damaging the structural integrity of the vibe. The corner of Hollis's mouth twitched. "The vibe," he repeated. "It is very fragile, sir." Hollis turned to Genevieve. "You heard the coordinator," he said, his voice flat and dismissive. "I don't interfere with venue management. It sets a bad precedent." Genevieve's jaw dropped. You're choosing her? She's nobody. She's staff." "She is the only person in this room I respect," Hollis said, his voice hardening into a growl that sent shivers of terror through the crowd. "And she gave you an order, leave, before I decide that escorting you is too polite and I throw you out myself." Genevieve went pale. She looked at Arthur and Mark, who stepped forward, crossing their massive arms. "This isn't over," she hissed at me, gathering her skirts. "You'll regret this." "Watch your step on the way out," I said sweetly. "Ideally, don't slip on the mess you made." Arthur and Mark each took one of her elbows. It wasn't gentle. They practically lifted her off the floor as they marched her toward the exit. The doors slammed shut behind her, sealing her screams outside. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the room. 300 shocked faces stared back at me. I cleared my throat, adjusted my headset, and looked at the band. "Well," I said into the mic, my voice echoing. "That's handled. Band, do you know anything in 4/4 time? Something loud? We have a vibe to repair." The band leader, looking terrified, immediately launched into a jazz number. The tension broke. The chatter exploded. I let out a breath I had been holding for 10 minutes. My hands were shaking. I looked down at my clipboard to hide it. "Spill managed, sir," I whispered to Hollis, not looking up. "I'll get a mop." "Leave the mop," Hollis said softly. Chapter 16. Hollis stepped into my personal space. He didn't care about the wine on the floor. He didn't care about the whispers. He was a gravitational pull I couldn't resist. "Look at me," he commanded. I looked up. His eyes were blazing, not with anger, with triumph, with pride, with something so hot and raw it made my breath hitch. "You ejected a duchess," he said, a tone of wonder in his voice. "You cited a contract clause and threw out the most powerful woman in the Eastern Pack." "She was rude," I defended weakly, "and she stained the floor." "You are terrifying," Hollis murmured, stepping closer. "You are magnificent." He reached out and took the clipboard from my hand. I tried to hold on to it. It was my shield, my security blanket. But he pulled it away gently and tossed it onto a nearby table. It landed with a clatter. "Hollis, I'm working," I protested, my heart rate skyrocketing. "Not anymore," he said. He reached up. His large, warm hands cupped my face. His thumbs brushed over my cheekbones. Then, very deliberately, he reached for my ear and unclipped the headset. He pulled it off, letting it dangle from his hand before dropping it to the floor. "The shift is over, Sophie," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are done serving. But the contract, I whispered, searching his eyes. The month isn't up. To hell with the contract, Hollis growled. I'm not renewing it. I don't want an employee. I don't want a handler. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. The entire room had gone silent again, watching. I want the woman who elbows me in hallways, he breathed. I want the woman who isn't afraid of me. I want you. Hollis, I warned, my voice trembling. People are watching. Let them watch, he said. Let them see. He didn't give me a chance to argue. He didn't give me a chance to run. He crashed his lips onto mine. It wasn't a polite society kiss. It was a claim. It was possessive, hungry, and overwhelming. He kissed me like he had been starving for 10 years, and I was the only sustenance in the world. His arms wrapped around my waist, lifting me off the ground, crushing the silk of my dress against his tuxedo. I froze for a split second, and then I melted. I wrapped my arms around his neck, tangling my fingers in his hair, kissing him back with every ounce of frustration and desire I had been bottling up since that first day in the closet. The room erupted, cameras flashed, gasps echoed. But I didn't hear them. I only heard the roar of blood in my ears and the low, possessive growl vibrating in Hollis's chest. He pulled back, just an inch, breathless. His lips were swollen, his eyes wild. Mine, he whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. Yours, I admitted, breathless. He grinned, a feral, beautiful grin. Good. Now, let's get out of here. I have a jet waiting, and I believe we have some unfinished business regarding the friction coefficient of my bedroom floor. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the exit, leaving the clipboard, the headset, and the stunned court behind us. We ran out of the ballroom like teenagers skipping class, laughing, the flashbulbs blinding us, heading straight into the night. But as we burst through the doors into the cool night air, Hollis stopped dead. His grip on my hand tightened painfully. What is it? I asked, looking up at him, still dizzy from the kiss. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the line of black SUVs blocking the driveway. Men in tactical gear were stepping out. They weren't his security. Get behind me, Hollis ordered, his voice shifting from lover to killer in a nanosecond. Now. Chapter 17. I flinched, burying my face in Hollis's tuxedo jacket, expecting a fight. I expected tasers. I expected a kidnapping attempt by a rival faction. Ms. Calder! One of the tactical gear-clad men shouted, leveling a Canon EOS R5 camera with a telephoto lens at my face. Look here. Did you plan the kiss? Is it a publicity stunt? Back up! Another man in Kevlar shouted, shoving a microphone that looked like a weapon toward us. Does the king know about your credit score? We have sources saying you rent. I blinked, peeking out from behind Hollis's arm. They weren't assassins. They were worse. They were the tabloid paparazzi. In this city where shifters could smell fear and snap bones, the press didn't wear fedoras. They wore riot gear because sometimes the subjects of their interviews bit back. Hollis didn't growl. He didn't attack. He simply raised one hand, palm out, and unleashed a wave of alpha dominance so potent it felt like the air pressure dropped 10 millibars. The paparazzi stumbled back, their knees buckling instinctually. The cameras lowered. One photo, Hollis said, his voice deadly calm. You have one photo of the kiss. If I see a single lens cap removed in the next 10 seconds, I will buy your publication and turn it into a blog about knitting. Clear? The tactical photographers scrambled into their SUVs like cockroaches fleeing a light. Tires screeched. Within 30 seconds, the driveway was empty. Hollis looked down at me, the golden glow fading from his eyes, replaced by that simmering, hungry heat. As I said, unfinished business. The next 8 hours were a blur of jet engines, the smell of leather, and the realization that the friction coefficient of the royal sheets was, in fact, dangerously high. I woke up alone. That was the first red flag. In romance novels, the hero is always staring at you when you wake up, looking like he's pondering the mysteries of the universe. In reality, I woke up face down in a pillow that cost more than my car, drooling slightly, with a headache that felt like a construction crew was drilling behind my eyes. I rolled over, shielding my eyes from the aggressively bright sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was massive. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a zip code. There were fireplaces, plural, a sitting area, and a walk-in closet that I suspected had its own climate control system. "Hollis?" I croaked. Silence. Panic, my old friend, sat on my chest. What did I do? I sat up, clutching the sheet to my chest. Memories of the night before crashed into me. The ball, the wine, the ejection of the Duchess, the kiss, the kiss. "Oh no," I whispered. "I didn't just break the contract. I incinerated it." I looked around for my clothes. My beautiful midnight blue gown was draped respectfully over a velvet armchair. My heels were neatly aligned, but my phone was on the nightstand. And it was vibrating. Not a gentle buzz, but a continuous, angry spasm that suggested it was about to explode. I picked it up with 2 fingers, terrified. Notifications, 40,291, trending worldwide. The Cleaner Queen, trending worldwide. Royal Elbow trending. Worldwide? Hollis smiled. I opened the news feed. The headline made my blood turn to ice. Cinderella with a clipboard. Who is Sophie Calder? The commoner who ordered the king to make himself useful and ejected a duchess. There were photos. Photos of me pointing at Genevieve. Photos of Hollis taking off my headset. And a high-definition video of the kiss that had 50 million views. The article detailed everything. My college GPA. The name of my first pet. A quote from my high school gym teacher saying I was bossy. "I have to go," I said to the empty room, scrambling out of bed. "I have to leave the country. I hear Antarctica is nice this time of year." I grabbed the dress. It felt ridiculous to put a ball gown on at 10 a.m., but my stealth pantsuit was back at the office. I wrestled myself into the silk, skipping half the hooks, and grabbed my heels. I didn't put them on. I couldn't risk the clicking noise. I carried them. I was going to do the walk of shame barefoot. In a palace. I crept toward the bedroom door. It was heavy mahogany. I turned the handle slowly, praying the hinges were oiled. They were. I stepped into the hallway. It was empty. The runner rug was thick enough to muffle my footsteps. Just get to the elevator, I told myself. Get to the lobby, call an Uber, change your name to Brenda, and start a new life as a sheep farmer. I made it to the top of the grand staircase. I could see the front door. Freedom. I took the first step down. "Going somewhere?" The voice came from the landing above me. I froze, one foot hovering in the air. I turned slowly. Hollis was leaning against a marble pillar, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a t-shirt that stretched tight across his chest. His hair was messy, his feet were bare, and he looked domestic and smug. I stammered, clutching my shoes to my chest. "I have a meeting. Vendor walkthrough, very urgent." "On a Sunday?" Hollis asked, raising an eyebrow. "Barefoot." "It's a yoga retreat venue," I lied. "Shoe-free zone." He walked down the stairs toward me. He moved silently, a predator in his natural habitat. He stopped 1 step above me, so we were eye level. "You're running," he stated. "I am retreating to a tactical position," I corrected, backing up until my heels hit the banister. "Look at the news, Hollis. I'm trending. They found my gym teacher. They know I got a C in chemistry. My life is over." "Your life has just started," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. He extended the other mug toward me. "Hazelnut. Extra hot. No foam." I looked at the coffee. I looked at the door. I can't be this, Hollis. I can't be the commoner queen. I'm an event planner. I stay behind the scenes. "Not anymore," he said, placing the mug into my hand. His fingers brushed mine, and that familiar spark zap-wired through my nervous system. "You stepped into the light last night, Sophie. You can't step back." "Watch me," I said, trying to step around him. He moved to block me. He didn't touch me, but his presence was a wall I couldn't pass. "You aren't running because of the news," he said softly. You're running because you woke up in my bed and for the first time in your life, you weren't in control. I like control, I snapped. Control is safe. This, you, the paparazzi in riot gear? This is chaos. Then let it be chaos, he said, stepping closer, crowding me against the railing. We'll manage it. You manage everything else. Manage me. I can't manage you, I cried. You're the king. And you are the only person who has ever told me to shut up and make myself useful, he countered. His gaze dropped to my mouth. I have a new contract for you. I stiffened. I'm not signing anything. Good, he said, reaching into his pocket. He didn't pull out a paper. He pulled out a small, black velvet box. My heart stopped. Hollis, no. It's not a ring, he said, seeing my panic. He flipped the box open. It wasn't a ring. It was a pin. A small silver lapel pin in the shape of the royal crest, a wolf's head. But instead of the usual ruby eye, the wolf had a tiny diamond tear. Or a drop of sweat. Is that... I squinted. It's a drop of sweat, Hollis said solemnly, because you make me work for it. I stared at him. Then a bubble of laughter, hysterical, terrified, genuine laughter erupted from my chest. You made a custom pin? I had it commissioned after the duct tape incident, he admitted, a boyish grin breaking through his stoic mask. Sophie, I don't want to hire you. I don't want to own you. He took the pin out of the box and pinned it carefully to the strap of my gown. I want to partner with you, he said, his voice turning serious. Equal stakes. Equal risk. If you run now, you leave me alone at the top. And it is very cold up here. He looked at me, his golden eyes stripped of all their armor. He looked vulnerable. He looked like the man who couldn't cook pasta. Don't sneak out on me, Sophie, he whispered. I looked at the front door, then I looked at the man offering me coffee and chaos. I charge double for weekends, I whispered. Hollis grinned, the expression lighting up the entire foyer. Done. He leaned in to kiss me, but a loud, booming knock hammered against the heavy front doors. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the sound of a battering ram. Police! A voice boomed from outside. Open up! We have a warrant for the arrest of Sophie Calder! I froze. Hollis pulled back, his eyes turning instantly black. What? I might have... I cringed. Technically, assaulted the Duchess's ego? Is that a crime? Open the door! The voice shouted again. Hollis looked at the door, then at me. He didn't look worried. He looked thrilled. Go upstairs, he ordered, rolling up the sleeves of his t-shirt. I'll handle this. No, I said, grabbing his arm. I took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. You're the king. You don't answer the door. I kicked off my heels, letting them clatter down the stairs. I marched past him, toward the door. Sophie? He called out, sounding alarmed. I grabbed the handle of the massive door and threw it open. Standing on the porch were 6 officers, the chief of police, and, standing behind them with a smug, bruised look, Lady Genevieve. Can I help you? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, wearing a wrinkled ball gown and holding a mug of coffee. Or are you just here to deliver my dry cleaning? Chapter 18. Dry cleaning? The chief of police blinked, clearly unprepared for a suspect who treated a felony arrest like a concierge service. He looked past me at the massive foyer, then back at my wrinkled ball gown. Ms. Calder, we have a sworn statement from the Duchess claiming you physically assaulted her and instructed security to drag her through a service exit. I didn't instruct them to drag her, I corrected, taking a sip of my coffee. I instructed them to remove the hazard. If the hazard lacked the structural integrity to walk in heels, that's a personal problem, not a criminal one. Genevieve stepped forward, her face a mask of vindictive triumph. See? She admits it. Arrest her. I want her in handcuffs, and I want pictures. The chief sighed, reaching for his belt. Ms. Calder, please step out onto the porch. She stays inside. A voice rumbled from behind me. Hollis didn't walk to the door. He occupied the space. He stepped up beside me, radiating a calm, terrifying authority that made the morning air feel heavy. He was still barefoot, still holding his coffee, but he looked at the chief of police like a wolf looking at a chew toy. "Your Highness," the chief stammered, bowing his head. We didn't know you were present." "Clearly," Hollis said, "since you are attempting to arrest my chief of operations for enforcing venue policy." Genevieve gasped. "Chief of operations? She's a party planner." "She is the acting authority of the royal estate." Hollis lied smoothly, his voice hard as granite. "And under the sanctuary laws of this territory, the authority has the legal right to eject any individual deemed a threat to the peace. You were drunk, Genevieve. You were disorderly. Ms. Calder showed remarkable restraint by not having you thrown into the moat." "There is no moat," Genevieve shrieked. "I'm having one built," Hollis replied deadpan. He turned his golden gaze to the chief. "Now, unless you intend to arrest my authority for doing her job, I suggest you remove your vehicle from my driveway. It's leaking oil on the pavers." The chief holstered his cuffs immediately, looking pale. "My apologies, Your Highness. Misunderstanding. Entirely." "Wait!" Genevieve grabbed the chief's arm. "You can't just leave. She humiliated me." Hollis took a step forward. He didn't yell. He didn't growl. He just lowered his voice to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "Genevieve, you came to my home with armed officers to arrest my mate." The word hung in the air. Mate. He hadn't said it publicly before. Not really. "If you ever step foot on my land again," Hollis continued, his eyes glowing faintly, "I won't call the police. I will call the cleaners." Genevieve went white. She looked at me, then at Hollis. Without a word, she turned and marched toward her car, her heels clicking angrily on the asphalt. The police scrambled to follow. Within 30 seconds, the driveway was empty again. I leaned against the doorframe, letting out a long breath. "You lied to the police," I noted. "I'm not your chief of operations." "You are if you sign the new contract," Hollis said, closing the heavy door and locking out the world. He turned to me, the playfulness back in his eyes. "So? Did I handle that correctly? Or was I too stiff?" I looked at him. This powerful, impossible man who had just rewritten the law to save me from a nuisance lawsuit. "You were adequate. A solid B+. Hollis laughed, pulling me into his arms. "I'll work on it." 6 months later. The annual summit of the Northern Pax was historically the most boring event on the calendar. It was usually 4 hours of speeches about territory borders and import taxes on venison. But this year, attendance was at an all-time high. Everyone wanted to see the king and his consultant. I stood by the buffet, adjusting the floral arrangement. I wasn't wearing a ball gown tonight. I was wearing a sharp, tailored tuxedo that matched Hollis's, with the silver wolf pin gleaming on my lapel. "The salmon is running low on tray 4, I murmured into my headset. "And tell the West Coast delegation to stop shifting in the hallway. The fur sheds on the carpet." "Copy that, boss," Arthur's voice came back. I felt a presence behind me, a warm, solid wall of heat. "You're micromanaging," Hollis's voice whispered in my ear. "I'm managing," I corrected, leaning back against him for a split second before straightening up. "Someone has to. You've been talking to that French diplomat for 20 minutes, and he's boring you to death. I can see your eye twitching." "He is boring," Hollis admitted, sliding his hand onto my lower back. "Save me. Create a distraction. Elbow someone." "I am a respectable business partner now," I teased. "I don't assault people, unless they spill wine." Suddenly, the French diplomat in question, a pompous alpha named Pierre, swaggered over to us. He ignored me entirely, focusing only on Hollis. "Your Highness?" Pierre boomed. "I was just saying, it is a shame you have allowed your court to become so informal. Letting staff wear tuxedos? It sends a confusing message." He gestured dismissively at me. The room went quiet. Old habits die hard. The court loved a show. Hollis stiffened. I felt the growl building in his chest. He was about to cause an international incident. I stepped in. "Ambassador Pierre," I said, smiling sharply. "It's funny you mention confusion, because I noticed your delegation filed their expense reports under entertainment rather than travel. A confusing message indeed. I'd hate for the audit to delay your visa renewal." Pierre's face went slack. I'm sure it was a clerical error," I said, stepping closer, forcing him to take a step back. "But I suggest you go fix it. Now, before I decide your visa is misfiled." Pierre paled, bowed hastily to Hollis, and fled toward the exit. I turned back to Hollis. He was looking at me with that familiar dark hunger that made my knees weak. "That," he whispered, "was incredibly hot." "I was just doing paperwork," I said, checking my watch. "Shift is over in 10 minutes. "End it early," Hollis growled, stepping into my space, ignoring the 300 people watching us. "Let's go home. I need you to yell at me about the budget." I smiled, unable to help it. "You're impossible." "I'm yours," he corrected. I looked at him, my king, my headache, my partner. I lifted my arm and, with practiced precision, drove my elbow gently into his ribs. "Move it, big guy," I ordered. "You're blocking the exit." Hollis didn't flinch. He just grinned, catching my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "Do it again," he whispered. And as we walked out of the ballroom, hand in hand, leaving the chaos behind us, I did. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Hollis Lyle was obsessive, wait until you meet this next alpha. The heroine is hiding a 20-pound cat under her coat during a job interview, and the Alpha King hears 2 heart fights and assumes the absolute wrong thing. It is pure chaos. Click the video on your screen right now. No Pets Allowed starts immediately.